getting into the topic of the third temple. Here's a question right off the bat. Is this a literal temple or is it a figurative, a spiritual temple? What's this talking about? Is this talking about a literal temple that will be built on, what is it called there now? Like, the Temple Mount in Israel, right there, the Dome of the Rock. Is it going to be a literal temple there? Or is this talking about something a little bit more unlimited than that? A little bit more limitless? Is this talking about a spiritual temple? Is this talking about us as the temple of God, the people of God, the living stones, if you will? Gnostic Native says figurative with 2 exclamation marks. I'm going to add another exclamation mark on that, Gnostic Native. I agree with that. I think it is figurative. I really do. Will there be a literal third temple built on the Temple Mount? I don't know, really. I don't know. There might be, but I think that what Ezekiel is talking about here is likely the figurative spiritual thing. Like we are the temple. Like God breaks out of the physical, material, limited realm into more of an unlimited spiritual realm. Okay, so let's get into this. Ezekiel chapter 40, and we're going to start reading from the WEB translation of the Masoretic Hebrew text. I should say this for those of you who don't know much about what we're doing here. We're going to be comparing 4 different manuscripts, not versions per se, manuscripts. I know there's some people that get that mixed up. They think that I'm just comparing 4 versions of the Bible. No, this is 4 manuscript families. There can be 1,000 versions of each manuscript, a version being just a translation of any given manuscript. The oldest is the Septuagint of all that we are, at least of those that we are going to be comparing tonight. The Septuagint began its conception was in the third century BC, before Yeshua was even born. Now there's a debate as to whether or not all of it was completed before Yeshua was born, or other books were added afterwards. There's a debate on that. But anyway, it started about the 3rd century BC, and much of it, at least the most important part of it anyway, was certainly completed way back in those days. That's the oldest. Up from there, we have let me think now. The Syriac. The Syriac text would be the second oldest, in around the 2nd, 3rd century. From there would be the Vulgate, aka the Latin Vulgate. This was a Latin translation by a man by the name of Jerome, or Saint Jerome. Apparently he had a couple manuscripts at his disposal. He had a couple manuscripts in his repertoire, and he used those manuscripts to translate into Latin, and thus he produced the Latin Vulgate. So that was about the 4th century BC. And believe it or not, the Masoretic Hebrew text, the Hebrew, a lot of Christians call it the original Hebrew. Well, that wasn't even finalized until like the 10th century. 10th century. It's not that old. It's pretty young compared to the other manuscripts. We'll be reading through, we'll be referencing all of them. I'm going to specifically stick with the youngest, only because it's the most popular. Most English Bibles, King James, New King James, NIV, CSB, and all the other SVs that sound like viruses, almost all of them are translated from the Masoretic Hebrew text. So seeing that it's so popular and everybody's so used to that root, that's what I'm going to be reading from. And I'm choosing the WEB translation, not because it's my favorite translation. Maybe I shouldn't say it, but put it this way. It's certainly not perfect, okay? And I wouldn't say it's my favorite translation. I'm choosing it because of the copyright. It's free. There's no copyright on it. So we don't have to worry about copyright problems on that one. Okay, let's start with that. Ezekiel chapter 40, verse 1, it says, "In the 25th year of our captivity, in the beginning of the year, in the 10th day of the month, in the 14th year after the city was struck, in the same day, Yahweh's hand was on me, and he brought me there." Now this is, remember we spoke about this a couple times before, when Yahweh's hand is on somebody. So typically, when it says Yahweh's hand is on somebody, in the scriptures, typically that's not necessarily a good thing. Here it looks like it is a good thing. Yahweh's hand was on me, and he brought me there. Whatever that means. What was this, a teleportation? What was this, a wormhole? What did he do? How did Yahweh's hand bring him there? Was he led by the Spirit? Is that how it happened? Like Abraham was led by the Spirit, as most believe, led out of his native land. So yeah, what does this mean? He brought me there. Yahweh's hand, and he brought me there. Literally brought, or just led him there? Verse 2, "In the visions of God, he brought me." Okay, so this is a little bit. "In the visions of God, he brought me into the land of Israel." So again, this is not literal. This is not literal. This is a spiritual thing. Yahweh's hand, in this case, at least this is what I see, folks. Let me know what you think in the live chat, but this is what I see. When Ezekiel says Yahweh's hand was on me, and he brought me there, he meant basically, quote unquote, in the Spirit. In other words, not physically. He didn't physically walk there, and he wasn't physically teleported there. It was more like a visionary thing. The Spirit of God, or the hand of God, came on him, and he was taken there in the visions of the Spirit, so to speak. Almost like the book of Revelation, you know. I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. "In the visions of God, he brought me into the land of Israel," says in verse 2. "And he set me down on a very high mountain, on which was something like a frame of a city to the south. He brought me there, and behold, there was a man whose appearance was like the appearance of bronze, with a line of flax in his hand, and a measuring reed, and he stood in the gate." So you know when you got a bronze man, especially back in, way back in those days, like, what was it, 2,600 years ago? 2,000, yeah, around there, 2,600 years. So way back in those days, it wouldn't be a robot. It wouldn't be a literal robot. This would have been a spiritual figure. So it's all spiritual. It's all spiritual, symbolic, figurative. There was a man whose appearance was like the appearance of bronze. It's not the Tin Man from the Wizard of Oz. This is a little bit different than that. With a line of flax in his hand and a measuring reed, and he stood in the gate. So this would be the gate of the temple, the gate of the city. Verse 4. "The man said to me, Son of man," so even this man calls Ezekiel the Son of Man, not just God. "Son of man, see with your eyes and hear with your ears, and set your heart on all that I will show you. For you have been brought here so that I may show them to you. Declare all that you see to the house of Israel." Very prophetic, very much like a prophet. Hey, I'm going to show you some stuff. I want you to relay the word. Verse 5, "Behold, there was a wall on the outside of the house all around, and in the man's hand a measuring reed 6 cubits long, of a cubit and a hand breadth each." So 6 cubits, that would be 9 feet, because a cubit is 1.5 feet. Okay, so 1.5 feet times 6. There you have your measurement in feet. So in the man's hand there was a measuring reed 9 feet long, basically. Now, if you go over to, this is one thing again, I kind of hate to say this because I know that the NLT has such a bad name, but the NLT is actually really good in some ways. The NLT usually converts these measurements and weights and such to something that we can relate to. So if you go here to NLT, and we go to verse 5. Okay, so I see what. So the NLT says, I could see a wall completely surrounding the temple area. The man took a measuring rod that was 10.5 feet long, and measured the wall that was 10.5 feet thick and 10.5 feet high. So he gets the 10.5 feet by adding the other stuff. So you got 6.5 cubits long. That's 9 feet plus a cubit. 6.5 feet. Excuse me. 6 cubits long, of a cubit and a hand breadth each. So the hand breadth would literally be as wide as your hand is, if you were to stretch your hand out like that. And a cubit is 18 inches. So if you add all that stuff up, I suppose it would come to like 10.5 feet long. Now it says right here in the footnotes of the NLT, the Hebrew 6 long cubits. It says 3.2 meters, each being a cubit 18 inches. That's 1.5 feet, or 45 centimeters, and a hand breadth that is 3 inches or 8 centimeters. 3 inches hand breadth. Okay. So that would be. I thought it was like the hand stretch, something like that. That'd be more like the measurement of your fingers, like that wide. 3 inches or 8 centimeters in length. Okay, so moving on here with the verse 5, the last part of it. It says, so he measured the thickness of the building 1 reed, and the height 1 reed. 10.5 feet high, 10.5 feet deep, if you will. Verse 6, then he came to the gate, which looks toward the east, and went up its steps. He measured the threshold of the gate, 1 reed wide, and the other threshold 1 reed wide. Now, there's a manuscript variation here. So right where it says he went up its steps, we go over here to the chart. You'll see up there in the top, what we just read there. Then he came to the gate, which looks toward the east, and went up its steps. He measured the threshold of the gate 1 reed wide, and the other threshold 1 reed wide. The Septuagint says, and he entered by 7 steps into the gate that looks eastward, and he measured across the porch of the gate equal to the reed. Wow. So that's different. And look at the difference. Let me just kind of zoom out here. I know it's harder to read, but if you put them side by side, it's easier to see the difference here. So right up here at the top, side by side. So the first half, it's so hard to compare because they're so different. I'll just scroll down here a little bit. So hard to compare. We got to take it phrase by phrase here because it's so different. So in the Masoretic Hebrew, it says, then he came to the gate, which looks toward the east. In the Septuagint, it says, and he entered by 7 steps into the gate that looks eastward. And he measured across the porch of the gate equal to the reed. Wow. Wow, okay. So it says 7 steps, whereas the Masoretic only just says steps. The Syriac, right here, see if I can zoom it in. The Syriac says steps too. And he came to the gate that looks to the east, and went up on its steps. And he measured the threshold of the gate. Vulgate says steps as well. Critical significance and scribal origin. The Septuagint explicitly designates the number of steps as 7, whereas the Masoretics, Syriac, and Vulgate preserve a general phrase without a number. So, without a numeral. This represents either a Greek scribal expansion or harmonization based on the other gates, such as in verses 22 and 26, or it could also be a Hebrew mechanical loss. It's got to be one or the other. Okay, either somebody added that in, or it was lost, and all the other families and manuscripts inherited that lost number in there. 7 steps. Okay, verse 7, speaking about 7, verse 7, every lodge was 1 reed long and 1 reed high, or one reed wide. Say that fast, like 10 times. Between the lodges was 5 cubits. The threshold of the gate by the porch of the gate toward the house was 1 reed. 1 reed, about 10.5 feet. 5 cubits would be about 7.5 feet, right? A cubit is 1.5 feet. Verse 8, he measured also the porch of the gate toward the house 1 reed. He measured the porch of the gate 8 cubits, and its posts 2 cubits, and the porch of the gate was toward the house. Okay, before we get too far, there is a manuscript variation in verse 8 where it says, he measured also the porch of the gate toward the house, 1 reed. The Septuagint says, and the 3rd chamber equal in length to the reed, and equal in breadth to the reed. Wow. What? And then the Peshitta, the Syriac, doesn't even have that verse at all. The Vulgate, he measured the porch of the gate within 1 reed. So the Vulgate is a little bit more like the Masoretic text in that sense. Very different, especially between the Septuagint, Masoretic, and Syriac. So what does that mean? What's the significance of it? This entire verse is omitted in the Peshitta as redundant. The Septuagint preserves a completely different sentence describing the 3rd chamber. This points to a major divergence. Either the Masoretic or the Vulgate either the Masoretic and Vulgate lines represent a double translation, scribal duplication of verse 9, or the Syriac / Greek lines suffered an omission. And many times we don't know, folks. Like, we don't know what it is. Is it that somebody lost it, or is it that somebody added it? It could be either way. Verse 9, or verse 10, we read verse 9 already. Verse 10, the side rooms of the gate eastward were 3 on this side and 3 on that side. The 3 of them were of 1 measure. The posts had 1 measure on this side and on that side. He measured the width of the opening of the gate 10 cubits, and the length of the gate 13 cubits. Keep in mind, the cubit is a 1.5 feet. Seek the Lord says, Shalom, Shalom, seek the Lord. Welcome and blessings multiplied to you and your family. Hope you're having an awesome evening. Give me a second, folks. Okay. Verse 12, and a border before the lodges, 1 cubit on this side, and a border and 1 cubit on that side, and the side rooms, 6 cubits on this side and 6 cubits on that side. He measured the gate from the roof on of the one side room to the roof on the other of the other. A width of 25 cubits, door against door. So that would be, again, 25 cubits would be, was that 37.5 feet, around there? Verse 14, he also made posts, 60 cubits, that's 90 feet. And the court reached to the posts around the gate. From the forefront of the gate at the entrance to the forefront of the inner porch of the gate were 50 cubits. There were closed windows to the side rooms, to their posts within the gate all around, and likewise to the arches. Windows were around inward, palm trees on each post. Okay. I have an image of what you could say this is an image that could represent something like what it looked like. This is let's get this, pull this up. Something like this, folks. Okay. Something like that. All right. The outer court in verse 17. Then he brought me into the outer court. So this is a temple, just like any other temple. You got the outer court, the holy place, the holy of holies, if you will. The outer court, verse 17. Behold, there were rooms and a pavement made for the court all around. 30 rooms were on the pavement. Okay, so that is, let's pull up her image again. So this is where we get this idea of the different rooms all the way around the outer court, as you can see right there against the wall. Okay. 30 rooms were on the pavement. The pavement was by the side of the gates, corresponding to the length of the gates, even the lower pavement. Then he measured the width from the forefront of the lower gates to the forefront of the inner court outside, 100 cubits, both on the east and on the north. Okay, manuscript variation back at verse, where is this now? Verse 14. Verse 14, where it says, he also made posts 60 cubits, 90 feet, that would be. And the court reached to the posts around the gate. Septuagint says, and the open space of the porch of the gate without was 20 cubits to the chambers round about the gate. We always see this with numbers, right? Numbers, it's easy to pick out the discrepancies and the variations with numbers. Not so much with words. You know, if you slip the pen with one little digit, it's not going to make much difference with a word. It may, but it may not. But with the number, it would, right? It would. Matthew in the live chat, it says, shalom everyone, been having a hard time getting here lately. All right, well, shalom and blessings multiplied to you and your family. Sorry to hear you've been having a hard time getting here. All right, well, glad that you're here anyways, Matthew. Hope all is going good from here on in. Yeah, so 60 cubits in the Masoretic text, right here. This is verse 14. 20 cubits in the Septuagint. In the Peshitta, now we got something else. We got something different. Then he made before the face of the gate 60 cubits, and before the front of the other outside gate 60 cubits. The Vulgate, he made also fronts of 60 cubits, and to the front the court of the gate on every side round about. Here's the significance of this right here. The height of the gate posts exhibits a huge divergence. 60 cubits, approximately 30 meters. And again, that would be 90 feet, approximately. That's huge. That's huge. Okay? Gate posts 90 feet in the Hebrew, Syriac, and Latin, but a more realistic 20 cubits in the Greek. 30 feet. So 20 cubits would be 30 feet versus close to 100 feet in the other manuscripts. I don't know about what you guys think, but let me know in the live chat if you disagree and why you disagree. To me, I think that, okay, so it seems to me like the Septuagint is probably the more accurate one, because it's just, who's going to make gate posts 100 feet tall? 30 feet, that's huge. That's huge all by itself, but 100 feet is way more than you could ever, that's just way extreme. So it says the 60-figure cubit is exceptionally tall for a courtyard gateway. Oh, no doubt. Implying a potential numeral scribal error in the Hebrew master stream. So here, folks, we have an example of a probable, I'll say, well, I should put it more like this, a likely scribal error that leaked into all of the other manuscript streams, but not into the Septuagint stream. So you see, so it's not always the majority rules or the majority is right. It's not always that way. So let's say way back in the day, we have the original Hebrew, and that Hebrew got copied and copied and copied, and somewhere down the line, somebody put 60 instead of 20 cubits. And in that particular trunk of the tree, if you will, just grew bigger and became more popular. And that's what eventually evolved into the Masoretic Hebrew, the Syriac, and the Latin. But the other one went right down to the Septuagint. So, I think it's possible and probably even likely that that's the case. Wow. So here's a question. Just for the sake of conversation. So in this passage of Ezekiel chapter 40, verse 14, we have manuscript variations. The Masoretic says 60 cubits. The Septuagint says 20 cubits. How similar in the Hebrew are these two numbers or Hebrew letters? How similar? Is this something that could be easily mistaken by a scribe? That's what I'm thinking. If we go over to Ezekiel chapter 40, verse 14, and we look in the interlinear, okay, so we got this word 60. This would be shin, yud, mem in the Hebrew. So that's what would be 60. So, how could that be mistaken for 20. A summik, right? Sorry, I said mem. It's summik, not mem. So it's shin, shin, yud, summik. So the Hebrew word for 20, as much as what I understand, is very similar to this. The only difference is the summik. There's a kaf there instead of a summik. So the kaf looks very much like a summik, except the kaf looks more like a backwards C. The summik looks like a D. So it's like a summik without that one side on it. So the problem with that is that the word for 20 is not only just one letter difference. There are different other letters difference. So the likelihood that this was visually confused by a one Hebrew letter is very low. I got a 60 cubit pillar between 90 to 100 feet tall is structurally absurd and disproportionate for this gate complex. Academic consensus leans toward the Septuagint's 20 cubits being original, and it's a more realistic dimension. The Masoretic Text says 60. It's generally viewed as either a later scribal exaggeration or a corruption, which the Greek translators either avoided because they had an older or better Hebrew manuscript or intentionally fixed to make architectural sense. So there is there's the lowdown on that, folks. All right. Moving on. Verse 20, the north gate. He measured the length and width of the gate of the outer court which faced toward the north. The lodges of it were 3 on this side and 3 on that side. Its posts and arches were the same as the measure of the first gate. Its length was 50 cubits and its width 25 cubits. Its windows, its arches, its palm trees were the same as the measure of the gate which faces toward the east. They went up to it by 7 steps. Its arches were before them. There was a gate to the inner court facing the other gate on the north and on the east. He measured 100 cubits from gate to gate. Verse 24. He led me toward the south, and behold, there was a gate toward the south. He measured its posts and its arches according to these measurements. There were windows in it and its arches all around, like the other windows. The length was 50 cubits and the width 25 cubits. There were 7 steps to go up to it, and its arches were before them. It had palm trees on this side and another on that side on its posts. There was a gate to the inner court toward the south. He measured 100 cubits from gate to gate toward the south. Then he brought me to the inner court of the south gate. He measured the south gate according to these measurements, with its lodges, its posts, and its arches according to these measurements. There were windows in it and its arches all around, and it was 50 cubits long and 25 cubits wide. There were arches all around, 25 cubits long and 5 cubits wide. The arches were toward the other court. The palm trees were on its posts. The ascent to it had 8 steps. Okay, folks. So another manuscript variation in verse 30, where it says, there were arches all around, 25 cubits long and 5 cubits wide. Again, that's about 37 some odd feet long and 7.5 feet wide. That verse is not in the Septuagint at all. The oldest text does not have that verse in it. The Syriac, its porches circled it. Their length was 20 and 5 cubits, and its width 5 cubits. So, it's similar. The Vulgate and the porch roundabout was 5 and 20 cubits and 5 cubits broad. The manuscript significance, this verse is completely omitted from in the Septuagint. It represents a classic scribal eye-skip haplography in the Greek in the Septuagint due to a dense repetition of identical dimensions, 25 and 5, in surrounding verses, or a late redundant expansion in the Hebrew, Syriac, and Latin branches. Either one. Verse 32, he brought me into the inner court toward the east. He measured the gate according to these measurements, with its lodges, its posts, and its arches according to these measurements. There were windows in it, and in its arches all around. It was 25 cubits long and 25 cubits wide. Its arches were toward the outer court. The palm trees were on its posts on this side and on that side. The ascent to it had 8 steps. He brought me to the north gate, and he measured it according to these measurements, its lodges, its posts, and its arches. There were windows in it all around. The length was 50 cubits. Again, this would be 75 feet, right? Every cubit is 1.5 feet long. And the width was 25 cubits. It'd be close to 40 feet. Its posts were toward the outer court. Palm trees were on its posts on this side and on that side. The ascent to it had 8 steps. 8 steps. Again. Verse 38. A room with its door was by the posts at the gates. They washed the burnt offering there. In the porch of the gate were two tables on this side and 2 tables on that side, on which to kill the burnt offering, the sin offering, the trespass offering. On the one side, outside, as one goes up to the entry of the gate toward the north, were 2 tables, and on the other side, which belonged to the porch of the gate, were 2 tables. 4 tables were on this side and 4 tables on that side. By the side of the gate, 8 tables on which they killed the sacrifices. There were 4 cut stone tables for burnt offerings, 1.5 cubits long and 1.5 cubits wide and 1 cubit high. They laid the instruments with which they killed the burnt offering and the sacrifice on them. The hooks, a hand-width long, were fastened within all around. The meat of the offering was on the tables. Okay, the very next verse here, we have a manuscript variation. This is verse 44. Outside of the inner gate were rooms for the singers in the inner court, which was at the side of the north gate. They faced toward the south. One at the side of the east gate faced toward the north. So the word singers specifically outside the inner gate were rooms for the singers. The Septuagint says, and he brought me into the inner court, and behold, there were 2 chambers. Again, chambers here. Remember earlier in the Septuagint, it said chambers. So this would have been back in verse 8, right here, where the Masoretic text says, he measured also the porch of the gate toward the house 1 reed, and then the Septuagint reads something very different, I should say. The 3rd chamber, equal in length to the reed and equal in breadth to the reed. So that goes down to very similar to the way that verse 44 mentions chambers. He brought me into the inner court, and behold, there were 2 chambers. It says nothing about singers. Nothing about singers. 2 chambers. And even the Syriac is even different still. Again, the law of manuscript variation here again. Two manuscripts that vary greatly. It's likely that the other ones also vary greatly. So the Syriac, the outside of the inner gate were arched chambers of princes. Princes in the inner court. This in the side of the north gate, and their faces to the south. So look at the difference here. Singers, two chambers, princes. What in the world? And then we got in the Vulgate, similar to the Masoretic, but not exact. It says, and without the inner gate were the chambers of the singing men in the inner court. The significance, a direct phonetic and consonantal confusion in Hebrew, Cherubim, singers, and Sarim, princes or rulers. The Peshitta translator read princes, while the Masoretic and the Vulgate read singers. The Septuagint bypasses this problem entirely, reading a simple spatial description, two chambers. Keep me out of that mess. I'm going to put two chambers in there instead. Verse 45. He said to me, this room, which faces toward the south, is for the priests who perform the duty of the house. The room which faces toward the north is for the priests who perform the duty of the altar. These are the sons of Zadok, who from among the sons of Levi come near to Yahweh to minister to him. He measured the court 100 cubits long, that'd be 150 feet, and 100 cubits wide, 150 feet. The altar was before the house. Verse 48. Then he brought me to the porch of the house and measured each post of the porch, 5 cubits on this side and 5 cubits on that side. The width of the gate was 3 cubits on this side and 3 cubits on that side. The length of the porch was 20 cubits and the width 11 cubits, even by the steps by which they went up to it. There were pillars by the posts, one on this side and one on that side. Manuscript variation alert. So it says the length of the porch was 20 cubits and the width 11 cubits, even by the steps which went up to it, by which they went up to it. The Septuagint says, and the length of the porch was 20 cubits and the breadth 12 cubits. So it's 12 instead of 11. And they went up to it by 10 steps. And there were pillars to the porch. That's different. You know, every other place we have 8 steps, 8 steps, 8 steps. Here in the Masoretic text, it doesn't say anything about the number of steps, but the Septuagint says 10 steps. The Syriac, similar to the Masoretic, and the length of the porch 12 cubits or 20 cubits, and its width 11 cubits. By steps they were going up to it. Oh, look at this. In the Vulgate's even different still. Usually the Vulgate follows one of the others, but this time it doesn't. It says the length of the porch was 20 cubits and the breadth 11 cubits, and there were 8 steps to go up to it. 8. A significant geometric divergence. The porch's width is 11 cubits in the Masoretic text, the Syriac and the Vulgate, but 12 in the Septuagint. Furthermore, the ascent has general steps, no number in the Masoretic and the Syriac, but 10 steps in the Septuagint and 8 steps in the Vulgate, reflecting differing architectural paradigms. Even this temple, third temple, is different depending on which manuscript you read. Ezekiel chapter 41, verse 1. He brought me to the nave and measured the posts, 6 cubits wide on one side and 6 cubits wide on the other side, which was the width of the tent. Variation. The Septuagint says, and he brought me into the temple, the porch of which he measured 6 cubits the breadth on one side and 6 cubits the breadth of the porch on the other side. So in the Masoretic it says the width of the tent. In the Septuagint it says the breadth of the porch. The Syriac, he brought me into the temple. He measured a post. Its width was 6 cubits from here, and its width 6 cubits from there. No final clause. The Vulgate, he measured the fronts 6 cubits, broad on this side and 6 cubits on that side. The breadth of the tabernacle. We had tabernacle in the Vulgate, nothing in the Syriac, porch in the Septuagint, and tent in the Masoretic. The significance of this, the final descriptive phrase, varies. The Hebrew Masoretic Text and Vulgate refer to the tent or the tabernacle. The Septuagint misread ohel as elam, porch, vestibule, translating it as a breadth of the porch. The Syriac Peshitta completely drops the final comparative clause as structurally redundant. Verse 2. The width of the entrance was 10 cubits, and the sides of the entrance were 5 cubits on one side and 5 cubits on the other side. He measured its length 40 cubits and the width 20 cubits. Then he went inward and measured each post of the entrance 2 cubits, and the entrance 6 cubits, and the width of the entrance 7 cubits. He measured its length 20 cubits and its width 20 cubits before the nave. He said to me, "This is the most holy place." Then he measured the wall of the house 6 cubits, and the width of every side room 4 cubits, all around the house on every side. The side rooms were in 3 stories, one over the other, and 30 in each story. They entered into the wall which belonged to the house for the side rooms all around, that they might be supported and not penetrate the wall of the house. So we have another manuscript variation. Manuscript variation, this is in verse 6. And this is where it says the side rooms were in 3 stories, one over another, and 30 in each story. They entered into the wall, 30 in each story. Septuagint says, and the sides were twice 90. Twice 90. Side against side. And there was a space in the wall of the house. Wow. Yeah. Twice 90 versus 30 in each story. Syriac says, and the side partitions, partition on partition, 33 of them, and the side partitions entered. The Vulgate, and the side chambers, one by another, were twice 33, and they bore outwards. So we got 33 versus 30 versus 30 versus twice 90. The significance of these variations, a famous numerical disagreement on the side chambers. The Masoretic text has 30 per story, 90 total. The Septuagint reads twice 90, 180 total. Peshitta reads 33, and the Vulgate reads twice 33, 66 total. This reveals deep confusion among ancient scribes over numerical notation. Verse 7, the side rooms were wider on the higher levels because the walls were narrower at the higher levels. Therefore, the width of the house increased upward, and so one went up from the lowest level to the highest through the middle level. I saw also that the house had a raised base all around. The foundations of the side rooms were a full reed of 6 great cubits. The thickness of the outer wall of the side rooms was 5 cubits. That which was left was the place of the side rooms that belonged to the house. Between the rooms was a width of 20 cubits around the house on every side. The doors of the side rooms were toward an open area that was left, one door toward the north and another door toward the south. The width of the open area was 5 cubits all around. Okay. Got another image here, slightly different image. Show you guys. Okay. Slightly different here, depicting the temple that's being described. All the rooms around the walls and the steps that go up on each side. We got in the middle, we got the altar. You see this. You got the inner court. We have the holy place, the Holy of Holies in there. And this is a speculation as to what this would have looked like, especially if it's literal. Verse 12, the building that was before the separate place at the side toward the west was 70 cubits wide, and the wall of the building was 5 cubits thick all around, and its length 90 cubits. So he measured the temple 100 cubits long, and the separate place, and the building with its walls 100 cubits long. Also the width of the face of the temple, and of the separate place toward the east, 100 cubits. Manuscript variation, not yet. We got to read a few more verses here. Verse 15, he measured the length of the building before the separate place, which was at its back, and its galleries on one side and on the other side, 100 cubits from the inner temple, and the porches of the court, the thresholds, and the closed windows, and the galleries around on their 3 stories, opposite the threshold, with wood ceilings all around, and from the ground to the window. Now the windows were covered. To the space above the door, even to the inner house and outside, and by the wall all around, inside and outside, by measure. It was made with cherubim and palm trees. A palm tree was between cherub and cherub, and every cherub had 2 faces, so that there was the face of a man toward the palm tree on one side, and the face of a young lion toward the palm tree on the other side. It was made like this through all the house all around. Cherubim and palm trees were made from the ground to above the door. The wall of the temple was like this. So the manuscript variation is in verse 16. The thresholds and the closed windows and the galleries around on their 3 stories. The Septuagint says something very different. It says, and the windows were latticed, giving light. Then it says, so as to look through, and the house and the parts adjoining. Syriac says, in the doorposts and the windows and the porches, and its length was as far as the windows. The Latin Vulgate says, the thresholds and the oblique windows, and ... the windows were shut over the doors. The manuscript, the significance of this variation, and the sanctuary windows closed, narrowed in the Masoretic text, opened, latticed to look through in the Septuagint, or slanted, oblique in the Vulgate. The Greek translation introduces visibility and illumination, while Hebrew, Syriac, and Latin emphasize a sealed, dark, and exclusive architectural space. Okay. The last paragraph of this chapter, verse 21. The doorposts of the nave were squared. As for the face of the nave, its appearance was like the appearance of the temple. The altar was of wood, 3 cubits high, and its length 2 cubits. Its corners, its base, and its walls were of wood. He said to me, "This is the table that is before Yahweh." The temple and the sanctuary had 2 doors. The doors had 2 leaves each, 2 turning leaves, 2 for one door and 2 leaves for the other. There were made on them, on the doors of the nave, cherubim and palm trees, like those made on the walls. There was a threshold of wood on the face of the door, the face of the porch outside. There were closed windows and palm trees on the one side and on the other side on the sides of the porch. This is how the side rooms of the temple and the thresholds were arranged. Manuscript variation back in verse 22. The altar was of wood, 3 cubits high, and its length 2 cubits. Its corners, its base, and its walls were of wood. The Septuagint says a wooden altar, the height of it were 3 cubits, and the length 2 cubits, and the breadth 2 cubits, and its horns, and the base of it, and the sides of it were of wood. You see how different it is here, comparing the two texts. The Syriac says 3 cubits was its height, and its length 2 cubits, and it had horns on it, and its length and its railings of wood. The Vulgate. The altar of wood was 3 cubits high, and the length thereof was 2 cubits, and the corners thereof aid the length thereof, and the walls thereof were of wood. The Septuagint provides a complete 3D measurement, including a breadth of 2 cubits, and explicitly lists its horns. The Masoretic Syriac Vulgate omit the breadth. This represents either a Greek scribal expansion harmonizing with Exodus altars, or a mechanical omission in the Hebrew parent text. Okay, next chapter, chapter 42, verse 1. Then he brought me out into the outer court, the way toward the north. Then he brought me into the room that was opposite the separate place, and which was opposite the building toward the north. Facing the length of 100 cubits was the north door, and the width was 50 cubits, opposite the 20 cubits which belonged to the inner court, and opposite the pavement which belonged to the outer court. Was gallery against gallery in 3 stories. Before the rooms was a walk of 10 cubits width inward, a way of 1 cubit, and their doors were toward the north. Now the upper rooms were shorter, and the galleries took away from these more than from the lower and the middle in the building. For they were 3 stories, and they didn't have pillars as the pillars of the courts. Therefore the uppermost was set back more than the lower, and the middle from the ground. The wall that was outside by the side of the rooms toward the outer court before the rooms was 50 cubits long. For the length of the rooms that were in the outer court was 50 cubits. Behold, those facing the temple were 100 cubits. From under these rooms was the entry on each side, as one goes into them from the outer court. Manuscript variations. We don't have much, actually, for the manuscript variations in that passage. So let's just continue. So we have verse 10, in the thickness of the wall of the court toward the east, before the separate place and before the building there were rooms. The way before them was like the appearance of the rooms which were toward the north. Their length and width were the same. All their exits had the same arrangement and doors. Like the doors of the rooms that were toward the south was a door at the head of the way, even the way directly before the wall toward the east, as one enters into them. He then said to me, the north rooms and the south rooms, which are opposite the separate place, are the holy rooms, where the priests who are near to Yahweh shall eat the most holy things. There they shall lay the most holy things with the meal offering, the sin offering, and the trespass offering, for the place is holy. When the priests enter in, then they shall not go out of the holy place into the outer court until they lay their garments in which they minister there, for they are holy. Then they shall put on other garments, and shall approach that which is for the people. Now when he had finished measuring the inner house, he brought me out by the way of the gate which faces toward the east, and measured it all around. He measured on the east side with the measuring reed 500 reeds, with the measuring reed all around. He measured on the north side 500 reeds, with the measuring reed all around. He measured on the south side 500 reeds with the measuring reed. He turned about to the west side, and measured 500 reeds with the measuring reed. He measured it on the four sides. He had a wall around it, the length 500 cubits and the width 500 cubits, to make a separation between that which was holy and that which was common. So one manuscript variation we have here is the right up here, verse 16. He measured on the east side with the measuring reed 500 reeds. The Septuagint says, and he stood behind the gate looking eastward, and measured 500 cubits with the measuring reed. The Syriac says, and he measured to the east wind on a measuring reed 500 reeds. So we got cubits versus reeds here. The Septuagint says cubits and not reeds. The Vulgate says, and he measured toward the east with the measuring reed 500 reeds, with the measuring reed round about. The significance, a massive spatial conflict. 500 reeds square is approximately 1.5 kilometers, is larger than ancient Jerusalem, making the temple complex enormous. A 500 cubit square complex, approximately 250 meters, fits the Temple Mount perfectly. The Septuagint's cubits resolves the geographical scale, while the Masoretic Peshitta and Vulgate reeds represent an eschatological expansion. So, what is more likely to be true? That it measures around the complex 250 meters, which is fits the Temple Mount perfectly, or 1.5 kilometers, which is larger than all of ancient Jerusalem. So, to answer that question, it's similar to the question that we asked earlier, and that is, which one would be more likely? The gate post would be 100 feet high or only 30 feet high. I think 30 feet makes a whole lot more sense. Kind of like the same thing here, where the lower number, the more plausible possible is the Septuagint. The other ones are just way out of line. Like, whoa, it's just... Now, here's the thing, though. If the temple was not literal, if this temple is not literal, if it's not a literal third temple, then anything's possible, right? If you're talking spiritual, it could be as big as the earth, or it could be bigger than the universe. So if you're talking literal, then certainly the Septuagint makes much more sense. The Septuagint makes much more sense here. You might say, oh, but the Septuagint is the odd one out. All the other manuscripts say the other number. All the other manuscripts have the other number in it. The Septuagint is the only one that's got that smaller number in it. When you think about the manuscript transmission, so just because the majority of the manuscripts have a different number doesn't mean that the majority is correct. Because as the manuscript was transmitted through time, it's possible that way back near the root of the transmission process, the mistake was made, or the change was made. And so that change broke off into the other branches of the other manuscripts, like the Masoretic and the Syriac and the Vulgate, whereas the Septuagint could have maintained the original number. It's more likely anyway. Okay, so we have, first of all, let's have another look at the picture there of the temple, or the illustration of it. Now I want to go over the chapters, chapter overview from last night and from tonight. So we usually have like 4 points, 4 interesting points of the chapters that we read. So from the, say, Ezekiel 37 to Ezekiel 39, we have the story of the dry bones. We have the story of the writing boards. We have the story of the Bronze Age king of Gog, Gog, if you will. We have the 7-year disarmament. So here are 4 points covering those topics. Briefly, 4 points. Number 1, the covenant of the dry bones. In the ancient Near East, an unburied corpse was the ultimate curse, representing total corporate death and exile. Ezekiel's dry bones are not a generic prophecy of theological aftermath, but a vivid legal restoration metaphor. It portrays Judean exiles who consider themselves dried up and cut off as being physically reclaimed and legally reestablished as a sovereign nation within their own land. Number 2, the alchemy of writing boards. Ezekiel's sign of the 2 sticks, that's Judah and Joseph, utilizes wooden writing boards. In ancient Babylonia, multi-leaved wooden writing tablets coated with wax were standard scribal tools. Joining 2 sticks physically represented a prophetic reenactment of scribal documentation, symbolically binding the northern and southern kingdoms, separated by the 10th century BC, back into a single document and kingdom. Number 3, the Bronze Age king Gyges. Who was Gog? Who was Gog? Historical scholars trace the name directly to Gyges, or Gyges, the legendary 7th century BC king of Lydia in Western Asia Minor, known as Gugu in Assyrian annals. Over the decades, Gyges' massive northern coalition became a mythological paradigm. For Ezekiel, Gog represented a terrifying, barbarian archetype from the edges of the known earth, weaponized by Yahweh for cosmic drama. Number 4, then we'll get into 4 more of the past few chapters that we read there. Number 4, the prophecy describes, this is the 7-year disarmament prophecy. Remember that they will not war anymore, and they will take the weapons of war and burn them, make them as fuel. The prophecy describes burning the coalition's weapons for 7 years. This contains a bitter geopolitical satire. The wooden bows, shields, and clubs of the invaders are so abundant that Israel's citizens will not need to chop wood from the forests. This is a dramatic ancient symbol of complete demilitarization, where military hardware is systematically repurposed into peaceful domestic fuel. We got 4 more points regarding the chapters 40, 41, 42. We'll read that in just a moment. Felix says, hi, everyone. Hello, Felix. Welcome and blessings multiplied to you and your family. Hope you're having an awesome night there, Felix. Okay, Ezekiel 40 to 42, 4 interesting factoids. Number 1, the angelic architect. The surveyor in Ezekiel chapter 40, verse 3, appears like shining bronze, holding a line of flax and a measuring reed. Bronze in Ezekiel indicates a heavenly, enduring substance. This celestial guide serves to guarantee that the new temple's blueprint is of direct divine design and not a human invention. Number 2, the sacred geometry. The temple's layout is a masterpiece of gradated holiness. As one moves inward from the outer gates to the inner courts and finally into the Holy of Holies, the steps increase. 7 steps, 8 steps, then 10 steps. And the space narrows. This architecture creates a literal physical buffer to protect the community from the raw, explosive power of the divine presence. Could this be what Yeshua was talking about when he spoke about the narrow way? Number 3, the sons of Zadok. Ezekiel chapter 40, verse 46 establishes a strict priestly hierarchy. The sons of Zadok are chosen as the exclusive legal keepers of the altar, because Zadok's lineage remained loyal during Davidic crisis. Ezekiel's vision rewards them with a monopoly on the high priesthood, excluding other Levitical lines. And number 4, the 500-unit separation. Ezekiel chapter 42, verse 20 describes a massive wall measuring 500 units on each side to divide the holy sanctuary from the common space. Whether this unit was cubits, as the Septuagint says, or reeds, as the Masoretic and Vulgate says, the enormous boundary emphasizes that the preservation of divine holiness is the absolute prerequisite for God's glory returning to dwell among his people.